Hello, everyone. Thanks, Gregory. Well, what to say after Daniel? Daniel said everything on what's happening in higher education. I mean, everything is here, and I will try to give you some insights of what we are trying to do at Neoma Business School. First of all, to give a few words about me, I'm Chief Digital Officer at Neoma, and I'm also HDR and PhD professor in marketing and specialized in the adoption and acceptance of disruptive innovation. So that's why I'm working on robotics, AR, and all XMV, what you want, R, and this kind of technology and their impacts in higher education. Of course, if you want to Google me, that's very easy. Today for me is a very special day because we are on the 8th of July, and precisely day for days, 5 years ago, we have launched the very first worldwide business case using virtual reality technology. You have had in this time in 2016 a lot of VR tools already, but much more, all of them were in the technical area, engineering area, and we were the very first business school using this kind of technology in order to create something new for education. What was new? As Daniel said, well, first of all, we need to engage our students far more than traditional methods. And what is interesting with these virtual reality case studies is that, of course, it's far more engaging because that's new. So you got the wow effect. But what is really interesting for us is that you are creating efficient content, and Danielle said that content is really important in terms of education. And the thing is that with this kind of virtual reality case studies, you are immersing students in, let's say, real situations. And that's very interesting for us because that's the real beginning of the story of our persistent immersive campus. I mean, you cannot go on innovation without climbing a curve and digging the issue and the technology to understand really precisely what you can do with it. And of course, what are the limits of this kind of technology? So concerning VR business case, we have produced 2 of them, and we are going to launch a third one in September. And we are producing our own content because, once again, I really believe that content is of high importance in terms of education. And a lot of our students have already used this kind of content, and also other universities in France and worldwide, because as we want to challenge the best business schools in Europe and in the world, we are, of course, proposing a lot of content and tools dedicated to higher education. And as you can see, we have won quite a lot of prizes around that. But what's happening in the classroom with virtual reality business case? First of all, you are canceling the learning routine. And once again, that's really important because when you are a professor, you are definitely highly challenged by the internet. I mean, if you are only providing information to your students, of course, they can get much more information faster and much more accurate online. So you are useless in the classroom. So what you need to provide is not only information, that's learning experience. And definitely virtual reality technology is really interesting to create these highly efficient learning experiences. Secondly, you are creating a physiological commitment because, of course, that's immersion. And when you are immersed 360 degrees in a situation, well, it's not like a traditional business case where you are reading a lot of things. You are acting in a real virtual world and discovering, observing, looking on what's happening in this world, and you can act in the world. So that's really interesting for the students and also the professor. You can develop a lot of these soft skills. I mean, when you are in the real world, in your first job, you never get, number 1, do that, number 2, do that, number 3, answer that kind of question. You are coming to the company and you are provided with a question, a problem, an issue to solve, and then that's it. You need to find your own path to solve the problem you are getting with. That's basically what we are doing with these VR business cases, because we don't provide the students the whole solution by asking the question in the right order. They are getting in a situation and looking on what's happening. As I said, we are importing the relevant managerial context into the classroom. And of course, we are providing both individual experiences and teamwork experiences. And definitely, what we have learned within these 5 years of using virtual reality technology inside the classroom is that it's really interesting to import managerial context into the classroom. And why? The thing is that you are creating very short cycles between theory, when the professor is talking about methodology, theories, and so on. And of course, you can push your students into the experience, into the practice, just by simply putting the headset on and the VR experience on. And that's very interesting to get these very short cycles. But how did we get to this? Basically, as Daniel said, we were looking on this kind of solution because Neoma Business School, it's about 10,000 of people in our community, located on 3 campuses, one in Reims, one in Rouen, and one in Paris. And we got students from the same program who are on Paris and Reims, for instance, or Reims and Rouen, or whatever. And the thing is that when you are a business school, the first thing you want to create is a common spirit into your promotion, into your program. You want students to talk one with each other. You want them to exchange experiences. You want to create common experiences. And that's very hard if you are on separated geographical locations. So we were looking for a couple of years around a technology that could allow us to create a sense of unity in terms of time, in terms of space. And then, as I said, we were in this immersive technology market from a couple of years. And of course, I know Gregory and the whole Laval virtual team for a couple of years as well. And when I've seen that Laval Virtual has launched its own event on a virtual persistent technology, I said, okay, that's the solution for us. So what we did, the thing is that we have created a whole building inside the Laval virtual world. Why this building? This building is dedicated, of course, to allow us to operate as our 4th campus. One in Reims, Rouen, Paris, and one in the Laval virtual. And what was the purpose of this building? It was to welcome all our community, around 9,000, a bit more, 9,000 of students, but also 650 staff and professors, faculty members, and of course a lot of people around the business school. And what happened? The thing is that the pandemic has not created this need. It has simply accelerated the process of adoption. And that was really interesting to see how within a couple of months we have come to a small experiments to a fully operating building for 1 year of learning. As you can see, we have run a lot of different learning experiences, from big auditorium with more than 300 of students and professors at the same time, but also, of course, small meetings, small work group operations, classes. We have mixed a lot of different tools. On the picture here, it's one of my class using, I would say, everything at the same time, because I was using some kind of technology about interactive technology from WooClap, but also I was using my own webcam, mixing all the content and the video flow inside the virtual campus and everything of that in real time. What does that mean for a professor and a faculty member? First of all, it's a matter of technology. Of course, you need to feel comfortable with this kind of technology. So you need to help faculty members to feel comfortable with that kind of technologies. That's very important because that's not natural, of course, in a business school. I mean, we are dealing about business, marketing, HR, finance, and so on. So when you are here in a business school and talking about digital transformation and technology, of course, first of all, they say, well, what is this gadget? But when you are explaining what's happening around the Zoom fatigue, when you are explaining about the theories behind the technology of persistent world, and for me, there are two key theories behind that. The first one is what we are calling extended self. There is a lot of literature around extended self. Extended self means that when you are using a digital device, but every kind of digital content, I mean, an avatar is an extended self as well. The thing is that this device or this avatar is acting just as if it was you. So it allows us to go on the second theory, which is called embodied cognition. And embodied cognition means that every kind of our cognitions in our brain is like a sensory and motion-based process. What does that mean? When you are in 2D or on a black screen on Zoom or Teams and running your classroom, that's very hard to get, of course, embodied cognition because you have no body at all. But when you are getting some avatars, of course, then you get this embodied cognition process. And you are creating co-presence of learners, co-presence of the professor. And this technology allows us to run a class in a very different way than on a simple and traditional Zoom or Teams tools. So that's really interesting in terms of theory, and you need to explain all of that to your faculty members and to feel them comfortable on the technical part of the story. But you also need to help them on the learning design. I mean, you are not running a class online on Zoom in the same way that online in this kind of persistent virtual world, or of course on-site, on campus. That's three different contexts, and you need to provide all the methodology and all the habits to your faculty members to help them to run and operate the best way to create the best learning experience. And we have been also one step further around that, because during the pandemics, one of the hard part of the story was how could we allow our students to gather as they were not allowed to do that. And I'm thinking about all the associations that are operating normally on our physical traditional campuses. And of course, we have decided to transfer some of this association life into the persistent virtual campus. And for instance, we have run concerts live, and we were one of the first to run these kind of concerts in France, and basically in a period where concerts were not allowed. And that was really interesting again for students because they were discovering this kind of technology on a different manner, not only on conferences or classes or, let's say, serious things, but they were discovering that, of course, being represented through an avatar can allow them to share a lot of new experiences, being together, but remote. What were the key challenges behind that? Well, the first thing is that you get a lot of positive impact because, as I've said, you can be together and distant. You are running all the things around the theory of embodied cognition and extended self with avatars. And what it is providing, first of all, it is providing less fatigue and far more fun for everyone, for the professor, but also for the students. And 5 years ago, with our VR-based case study, it was very hard for me to get my students having a break during the 3-hour session. And again, here on this persistent virtual campus, it was the same story. I mean, they didn't want to get off the platform, and they simply want to continue to exchange between them and, of course, with me. What was really interesting, as I said, with the VR business case, we were providing the managerial context into the classroom. What we have done with the persistent virtual campus is that we have provided the Neoma Business School campus at home for everyone. And that was really interesting because, of course, you are doing that, you are creating a sense of unity, as I said, in terms of space and time, but you are also providing common cognitive schemes. I mean, when you are acting on this persistent virtual campus, you are acting like in real life, like in a real like in a real campus of Neoma, and the students were able to find all the services from the school just right inside the virtual campus. You are providing more fluidity and spontaneity in the exchanges. I don't know for you, but every of my traditional video conferencing meetings are running the same way. It begins at 9, it ends at 10, and that's it. When you are running an event on this kind of tool, of course, you are beginning at 9, and you are supposed to end at 10, but you got something before the meeting, and of course, you got something afterwards. And that's really interesting because you never had this kind of, let's say, habits with Zoom or Teams, and then you have that, like in real life, on the persistent virtual campus. So very interesting to provide a lot of spontaneity and exchanges between students and also between faculty members and staff members and, let's say, all members of our community. That was for us also a real concrete experience in terms of future of work. I've been contacted, and I've exchanged a lot with the Laval virtual teams, but I've been contacted by a lot of companies to try to understand how they could run a new digital workplace using this kind of tool. And again, we have created I think, one of the biggest experience around working through avatars for 1 year long and inside our own process, because the hard part of the story was to provide this tool in the most easiest way for everyone. And if you want to reserve a class or a room on the persistent virtual campus for a staff member, that's very easy. They are simply using their traditional classical software to do it, like in the real campus. But that was quite a challenge for all the IT teams. So definitely that was a way to revisit the distance learning, and we believe that there is not only one way to run education for the future. As Daniel said, we got a lot of technologies available. I mean, all these AR, VR, and so on, but you also get AI, you can think about automation, you can think about a lot of things, and all these technologies got a lot of impact in terms of education. And what we are trying to do at Neoma is definitely to climb on the curve of innovation, to understand really what we can do with all of that, and to get a lot of tools, like a portfolio of different tools, in order to maximize the learning experience value. So as a conclusion, we have deployed that in September 2020. That was for more than 10,000 of people. It represents a building with more than 85 rooms, so I've tried to calculate some equivalent in the real life. Let's imagine that's a building of 10,000 of square meters, so that's quite big, and when you are connecting on the Laval virtual world, you can see, of course, the building and the campus of Neoma. And what was really interesting, and I really thank all the Laval virtual team and of course Laurent, around that, is that we are sharing the same values. I mean, I think that the key part of that story is that it allows us to share our communities and to allow our communities, the business community of our students, but also the digital and technical community of Laval Virtual to meet. I've met some people from Massive Immersive inside the virtual campus, but a lot of other people, and it was really fun. I've met also some of my students at unexpected time. That was just 2 days after Christmas at 7 p.m. And I've seen these two students, and we engaged their conversation like in the real life on the real campus. And it allows all of that. And I do believe that this kind of technology is going to continue to exist after the pandemics, because, of course, when you are through this kind of crisis where you cannot gather all of people physically, you need to get these kind of tools. But you got plenty of situations into life of business school that allows us to gather people, for instance, international people. You can create a lot of things for international students, but you can also create new kinds of learning events. And I'm thinking about one of our faculty members who was running an international case competition on only 1 hour physical campus. And when he tried that online through the virtual persistent campus, he said, okay, next year I'm doing on that tool only, because you can gather hundreds of people from everywhere. You simply need to organize that and to design your learning experience. So definitely for me, that's a really interesting hybridization of what we are used to do in the real world and what we can do being distant. And that's really an interesting path to dig in terms of the future of digital workplace. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Alain. If anyone have a question, yeah, you can take the mic. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Use the microphone, please.
Thank you. Quick question. How did you make it possible to engage your professor into that kind of tools? Because we know that it's kind of difficult to engage, even sometimes with Teams or with Zoom. For them, it's not traditional learning. So I fully agreed with what you said on learning design, and we have to modify the learning that we traditionally do when we are using that tool. But how did you engage all your professor and staff into that kind of difficult digital tool?
Very interesting question. You're right. I mean, that's one of the hard part of the story. But we are lucky enough at Neoma that we have begun that kind of innovation path a couple of years ago. I mean, when we have decided to create the digital transformation department, that was one of the key topics to change the culture of the organization. And I've simply summarized that in a very simple formulation: test and learn. Test and learn is a very classical way of thinking in design thinking, but it's not so common in the education business area. The thing is, when you are talking about test and learn everywhere, every time, in every meetings, time by time, it begins to be natural for people. And of course, when you are coming with a new tool like this one, the first reaction was always the same. Okay, that's a gadget. Okay, that's a game. Yes, you can think that's a game. But what do you believe is the most efficient? To learn by playing or to learn by being bored? Of course, by playing. Everyone agrees with that. The neuroscience says you better learn when you are playing. So we have begun to explain all of that. We were in the right organizational culture, and of course, we have provided a lot of support. So a lot of full-time positions to help faculty members on the technical part, but also, as I said, on the learning design part. And you really need to do both of that, because if you are only working on one part of this, you never get a real good learning experience.
If you agree, we take just one last question, because after we have a panel with all speakers, so we can talk.
What about the students' attention and engagement with this? Usually, we know that we have about 20 minutes of attention. Can we have more with this kind of solution?
Yes and no. You are sure to get the first 20 minutes. So that's really interesting, because at least you get these first 20 minutes. But as I said, learning design is highly important. And when you are creating a learning experience on this kind of tool, you need to rethink totally the way you are running a class. And you really need to think like if you were in a real life. So that means that you need to create movement. inside the virtual campus to allow students to move with their avatars. And for instance, we have created like games, treasure chase, and that was really interesting because you could see all these avatars running through the virtual campus, and that was a lot of fun for them. So it's not so hard to get a lot of engagement from your students, but definitely you need to know what you can do with the tool and, of course, to redesign everything. And again, that's a matter of support on your faculty members. And, of course, you need to provide support on the technical side of your students' community because they are not necessarily so at ease with innovative technologies. I mean, of course, they are all digital natives, but as I say, they are digital natives, but they are not necessarily digital masters. And you want them in a business school or higher education to make them mastering digital technologies. So you need to provide support to help them, to provide information, content, and learning around these kind of tools. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alain. I like the test and learn method.